My name is Amelia, and I am 28 years old. The shouting was already in full swing. A storm that had been brewing for years and had finally broken in the narrow, beige hallway of the second floor. My Aunt Carol's voice was a weapon, sharp and loud, and it was aimed directly at me. Every word was designed to humiliate, to cut me down in front of anyone who might be listening from behind their apartment doors. She jabbed a finger toward my doorway, her face a mask of furious disappointment, a look I knew better than her own smile. This performance of hers was a family tradition, but today felt different. I just came from Leo's apartment, Amelia. Do you understand the difference? He has a view of the park. You have a view of a brick wall. He is making something of his life, closing deals, earning respect, while you hide away in this glorified cupboard, playing with paints like a child. When does it end? When do you finally decide to grow up and stop being such a profound embarrassment to this family? You are wasting the best years of your life on a silly, pointless little hobby and pretending it's a career. Her voice climbed with each word, a crescendo of contempt that made the air feel thin and sharp. I stood there, silent, not because I was ashamed, but because a cold, hard knot was forming in my stomach. For years, I had absorbed these insults, smiled through the condescension, and endured the endless comparisons to her perfect son. I let her believe I was the struggling artist, the family charity case. Because the truth was a secret, I guarded more closely than anything. She saw a failure living in a small, cheap apartment, too blind by her own prejudice to see the bigger picture. She thought she was standing in just another hallway, belittling her poor, unassuming niece. She had absolutely no idea she was standing on my property. She saw the tenant of apartment 2A, the girl who was barely scraping by. She couldn't see the owner of the entire complex, the person who signed the checks and paid the taxes, the one who held the power to decide who stays and who goes. She was so focused on my supposed failures that she never once stopped to question how I could afford to live in the city at all. This time, her words carried a new, sharper edge, a threat that went beyond simple family scorn. "Leo is speaking to the building manager, you know," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hiss loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "He's telling them about the kind of people who bring down the property value, people with no stable income, who are a liability. Don't be surprised when an eviction notice shows up on your door, dear. It would be for the best. Truly, it might be the wake-up call you so desperately need." That was it. That was the moment. The years of quiet endurance fell away, replaced by a cold, resolute anger. She wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was threatening my home, my tenants, and the legacy a kind old man had entrusted to me. The game had changed. She thought she was about to get me kicked out, but what she had really done was hand me the justification to finally and permanently show her the door to my world. Her son wasn't the only one who could talk to the management. After all, I was the one who hired them. My aunt's threat hung in the air long after she and Leo had gone upstairs, probably to celebrate their victory. But her words sent me backward, not in defeat, but in memory. My story in this building didn't start with her venom. It began with the smell of wood polish and the quiet kindness of a man named Mr. Henderson. When I first moved in, I was just a student with a part-time job, and he was the old landlord who seemed to be fixing everything himself. He saw me struggling to patch a tear in my window screen one afternoon, and instead of just watching, he came over with his own tools and showed me how to do it right. That's how it started. I began helping him, trading my time for a small break in the rent. I'd help him paint fences, sort through paperwork, and listen to his stories about the people who lived here. He wasn't just a landlord, he was a caretaker. He knew who was having a new baby, who had lost a job, who was lonely. He told me his own children only ever called to ask what the property was worth, never to ask how he was doing. He saw that same greed in my cousin Leo, who once complained to Mr. Henderson directly that his own apartment wasn't big enough for his status. I remember Mr. Henderson looking at Leo with a tired, sad expression before turning to me. He said, "Some people see a house, Amelia. Others see a home. The world has enough of the first kind." He wasn't just talking about the building. He was talking about character. He was a shrewd man who had built this place from the ground up, and he was terrified his legacy would be turned into a quick profit by people who didn't care. He saw something different in me, a quiet respect for the work and for the people who made this place a community, not just a property. When he got sick, he didn't call his children. He called me and his lawyer. The inheritance wasn't a sudden windfall. It was a carefully planned transfer of responsibility, handled through a legal trust that cost a small fortune to set up. He made me promise I would care for the tenants and not sell to developers for at least a decade. I created the management company on paper to handle the rent and official notices, allowing me to stay anonymous, to live among the people I was meant to protect. It was the only way I could truly know them without the strange wall that money puts up. But now, my aunt's threat to get me evicted felt like a direct assault on that promise. She and Leo weren't just attacking a poor artist. They were unknowingly trying to dismantle the very foundation of Mr. Henderson's legacy. They were using the system I had set up for privacy as a weapon against me. Hiding wasn't working anymore. My aunt thought she had landed a massive blow, but all she had really done was show me exactly where the first battle needed to be fought. I went inside and pulled out the thick binder with all the tenant leases, my fingers tracing the name on apartment 4B. Leo, my aunt's words lit a fire. Under me, for 2 years, I had been a ghost in my own building, a secret owner who just wanted a quiet life. But now, that quiet felt like weakness. I started paying attention, really watching. I wasn't just Amelia from 2A anymore. I was the guardian of this place, and I needed to see exactly what I was up against. The management company I hired also installed a basic security system in the common areas, something Mr. Henderson never had. I'd always felt weird about it, but my lawyer insisted it was necessary for liability. That night, I decided to look at the footage from the lobby. What I saw turned the knot in my stomach to ice. There was my Aunt Carol, just minutes after our fight, meeting with Leo by the mailboxes. It wasn't just her complaining to him. It was a strategy session. I watched my cousin, the gold standard of success, hand his own mother a piece of paper. He was pointing, explaining, coaching her. He wasn't just a bystander to her cruelty. He was the director of the whole show. He was actively plotting to get me thrown out, using his mother as his bulldog because he was too much of a coward to do it himself. The next day, I ran into him by the elevators. He gave me this big, fake smile, the one he always uses when he wants something. "Hey, Amelia," he said, like nothing had happened. "Listen, Mom can be a lot. Don't take what she said to heart." It was a masterclass in manipulation, trying to play the good guy while sharpening the knife behind his back. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw past the entitled cousin to the petty, lazy man underneath. He wasn't driven by some grand evil. He was driven by convenience. I wanted to call him out right there, to play the security footage on my phone and watch his smug face crumble. But that wasn't the right move. It would just be my word against his, a messy family drama. I needed more. I needed to understand the why. That evening, I got my answer. I saw my aunt knocking on the door of apartment 3B, the unit directly above mine. The woman who answered was new. She didn't know me well. I watched from my peephole as my aunt gave her a sad, sympathetic look and started talking, gesturing toward my apartment. She was recruiting soldiers. That's when the true, sickening reality of it all hit me. This wasn't just about getting me evicted. I pulled out the building floor plans, the ones I had memorized. My apartment, 2A, was identical to Leo's, 4B, in every way but one. The building is set at a slight angle, and because of that, my unit gets the morning sun and has a clear view of the park. His unit faces the back alley. This entire campaign of humiliation, the lies, the conspiracy, it was all because my cousin wanted a better view to drink his morning coffee. The war wasn't over my life, it was over my sunlight. And now, my aunt was turning my neighbors into weapons to help him win it. My cousin's petty reason for wanting me gone made everything worse. It wasn't about family concern, it was about sunlight. The next few days were hell in slow motion. The atmosphere in the building turned sour. Neighbors who used to smile at me would now get quiet when I walked by, or quickly look down at their phones. I could feel the poison my aunt was spreading working its way through the community, turning people I'd known for years into strangers. Carol's campaign was working. She felt powerful, and that made her bold. So bold that she put up flyers for a community action meeting. The meeting was held in the small common room on the ground floor. It felt like walking into my own trial. My aunt stood at the front, with Leo sitting in the first row, looking smug, like a king watching his champion in the ring. She had managed to gather about a dozen tenants, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hostility. She didn't call me out by name at first. Instead, she spoke about certain tenants who didn't respect the community rules, who were a financial risk, and who lacked the right character for the building. Every word was a thinly veiled arrow pointed directly at me. Then came the blow that truly shattered me. She brought up Sarah, a single mother on the first floor, who had been struggling. "Take the tenant in 1C, my aunt said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I know for a fact she was late on rent last month. The management has to be strict. We can't let this place turn into a charity house for people who can't handle their affairs." My blood ran cold. I knew Sarah had been late because her son had been in the hospital. I had personally told the management company to waive the late fee and give her time. A secret act of kindness. Now, my aunt was using that woman's private struggle as a weapon in her public war against me. Sarah was in the room, and I saw her face crumble with shame. Before I could even think of what to do, my aunt turned and pointed directly at me. "And it all starts with people like Amelia. If we allow unemployed artists who contribute nothing to stay, we are sending a message that standards don't matter." All the air left my lungs. The faces in the room swam before my eyes. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were a jury. And my aunt had already declared me guilty. I couldn't breathe. I just turned and walked out, the sound of my aunt's triumphant voice following me down the hall. I made it to my apartment, locked the door, and slid down to the floor. This was my breaking point. My attempt to be a quiet, compassionate landlord had blown up in my face. The very people I had sworn to protect were now convinced I was the problem. My secret wasn't a shield anymore. It was a prison I had built for myself. In that moment, sitting alone in my silent apartment, I felt like I had failed Mr. Henderson, and I had lost everything. I spent that night on the floor, surrounded by MY canvases, feeling like a complete fool. The promise I made to Mr. Henderson felt like a crushing weight. How could I protect a community that now saw me as a threat? For the first time, I seriously considered selling the place. I could take the money, disappear, and let some faceless corporation deal with my aunt and her drama. It was the easy way out, and it was so tempting. But when I woke up to the sound of shouting in the hallway, I knew the time for easy was over. The fight had come to my door, and I had to answer it. When I opened my door, The hallway was buzzing with panic and confusion. There were bright orange notices taped to several doors. Eviction notices. Mrs. Gable, one of my aunt's main supporters, was staring at the one on her door, her face white with shock. "This can't be right," she stammered to another tenant. "It says, for breach of community conduct and targeted harassment. What does that even mean?" The message was clear. The management had acted, but not in the way anyone had expected. The power was shifting. Then I saw it. A matching orange notice plastered right on the middle of Leo's door. Apartment 4B. He threw his door open, his face a mess of sleep and fury. "This is insane," he yelled, ripping the paper off. "Property damage. Illegal subletting. Who told them about that?" I did. After the meeting, I hadn't slept. I had spent the entire night in front of my laptop. Not as the victim from Tua, but as the owner of the building. I went through every file, every complaint, every piece of evidence I had quietly collected, and I finally used it. Just then, my Aunt Carol came marching down the hall, a triumphant smirk on her face. She saw the notice on Leo's door, and her smile faltered. But then she saw the orange paper on my door, and the smirk returned, wider than ever. "Well, well," she said, her voice full of satisfaction. "It looks like I was right, after all." Management finally came to their senses. She strode over to my door to gloat, ready to read my final judgment out loud for everyone to hear. But she stopped dead. The tenants fell silent. The notice on my door was different. It wasn't a standard eviction form. It was printed on thick, heavy paper, the kind used for legal documents. The headline was in bold: "Official letters, mandatory tenant meeting regarding change of ownership," and at the bottom, beneath the details of a meeting scheduled for noon. That very day in the courtyard was a signature, clear as day. Signed, Amelia Reynolds, owner. My aunt's jaw went slack. Her eyes darted from the paper to my face, the smugness instantly replaced by a wave of pure, horrified disbelief. The secret was out. The courtyard felt like a courtroom. Every tenant was there, drawn by the eviction notices and the shocking revelation on my door. They stood in tense, quiet groups, whispering and glancing between me, my aunt, and my cousin. Carol and Leo stood off to the side, looking pale and cornered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking under my aunt's gaze. She was the one who couldn't look me in the eye. I had spent the last hour on the phone with Mr. Henderson's old lawyer, who advised me to be direct and stick to the facts. He now stood discreetly behind me, a silent, professional anchor. I stepped onto the small stone patio that Mr. Henderson used to call his Stage 4 community announcements. I wasn't the girl in the paint-stained jumpsuit anymore. I was dressed in a simple, dark blazer, and when I spoke into the small portable microphone, my voice was clear and steady. "Good afternoon. I am Amelia Reynolds, and as the notice stated, I am the owner of this building." A wave of murmurs went through the crowd. I let the fact sink in before I continued, explaining my relationship with Mr. Henderson and his wish for me to protect the community he built. I explained that I kept my identity quiet so I could get to know everyone on a human level, not as a landlord. "Unfortunately," I said, my eyes finding my aunt's, "that silence allowed a false and malicious story to be spread. It was meant to turn you against a neighbor, to have me evicted from my own home." Just as the whispers started to turn against me again, an older man named David stepped forward. He had lived here for 20 years. "She's telling the truth," he said, his voice full of authority. I knew Mr. Henderson well. He told me he was leaving this place to the one person he trusted to care about the people, not the profit. He was talking about Amelia. That was the first domino. The next one fell immediately. Sarah, the young mother my aunt had shamed at the meeting, found her voice. "They're lying about her," she said, stepping forward. "Carol accused her of being a problem, but Amelia is the reason I wasn't evicted last month. The management company sent me a nasty letter, and she secretly told them to back off and give me time. She showed me kindness when no one else would." Her words landed like a punch, wiping the last traces of doubt from the faces of my neighbors. The tide didn't just turn, it was a tidal wave. The tenants who had signed my aunt's petition now looked at her with open disgust. They saw the truth. They had been used as pawns in a petty, selfish game. All the whispers, all the accusations, and all the doubt that had been suffocating me for weeks, vanished in the sunlight of the truth. All eyes in the courtyard now turned to the two people left standing alone. My aunt and my cousin, their conspiracy. Exposed for everyone to see, their trial had begun. For a long moment, the only sound in the courtyard was the quiet hum of the city. Every tenant was staring at my aunt and cousin, their faces a mix of pity and disgust. The silence was their verdict. Stripped of her audience and her self-proclaimed authority, my Aunt Carol finally broke. It wasn't a strategic retreat. It was a complete, messy detonation of the ego. Her face, which had been pale with shock, turned a blotchy red as she stormed towards me, her fists clenched at her sides. "You liar," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "This is a trick. You forged that will. You manipulated that poor old man when he was sick and lonely. You have never earned an honest pound in your life, and you expect us to believe you own all of this." She waved her arm wildly at the building around us. "My son is a success. He has a real career. You are nothing but a conniving, jealous little girl who cheated her way into something you do not deserve." It was a desperate, ugly tantrum, and it was having the opposite effect she intended. The more she screamed, the more pathetic she looked. Then Leo, seeing his own eviction was now sealed and his mother was digging their hole even deeper, made his final, cowardly move. "It was her idea," he blurted out, pointing a trembling finger at his own mother. She was the one who was obsessed with it. She kept pushing me, saying I deserved a better apartment, that you were a disgrace. I just went along with it. I never wanted it to go this far, Amelia, I swear. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that it silenced even my aunt. She stared at her golden boy, the son she had championed and defended her entire life, as he threw her away to save himself. That was the real showdown. It wasn't between me and them. It was between their own lies and the pathetic truth. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to insult them. I looked at my cousin, a man I no longer recognized, and spoke with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Your eviction stands, Leo. You need to be out in 30 days. Then I turned to my aunt, who now just looked broken. "Carol," I said, my voice firm but not unkind, "you are not to enter this property again. This is my home and my business, and you are no longer welcome here. The family issues we have are one thing, but what you did to this community, to Sarah, to my tenants, that ends today." I didn't need to shout. The quiet finality of my words was the most powerful blow of all. There was nothing left for them to do but turn and walk away, leaving the community to finally begin healing. After the storm, there was a strange, quiet peace. The weeks that followed were about healing, not just for me, but for the whole building. The tenants who had sided with my aunt came to me one by one. Their apologies awkward but sincere. I accepted every single one. A community isn't about holding grudges, it's about rebuilding trust. We started a small community garden in the courtyard where the final confrontation happened, turning a place of conflict into one of growth. It was cheesy, but it felt right. We were planting new roots. Looking back, the whole ugly affair taught me something powerful. My aunt judged my entire life based on the size of my apartment and the paint under my fingernails. She saw a failure because I didn't have a fancy job title or a new car. She measured my worth with a ruler that only saw material things, and it made her blind to everything else. She couldn't see the hard work, the dedication, or the responsibility I carried for 60 other families. She couldn't see my real success because it wasn't something she valued. The lesson here isn't just don't judge a book by its cover. It's deeper than that. It's about understanding that the way you judge others is almost always a map of your own insecurities. My aunt's obsession with status was a reflection of her own fear of being seen as ordinary. Leo's need to put me down was because, deep down, he knew he had never truly earned anything on his own. They needed me to be small so that they could feel big. True strength and true wealth are quiet. They don't need to scream for attention. As for where they are now, Leo's eviction went through. He had to pack up his fancy espresso machine and move back into his childhood bedroom in his mother's house. The last I heard, their perfect mother-son relationship had crumbled under the weight of their shared failure and resentment. My aunt is no longer welcome at family gatherings. The story got out, and no one has much patience for her brand of drama anymore. They didn't end up on the street. They just ended up trapped in the small, bitter world they had created for themselves. And me, I finally feel at home. I still live in apartment 2. Ether View is just as beautiful as I thought. I've embraced my role as the owner, and this building has become the community Mr. Henderson always knew it could be. So next time you find yourself measuring someone's worth, stop and ask yourself what ruler you're using. Look past the surface, because you never, ever know the full story. You never know when you're talking down to someone who might just own the entire complex.